Have you ever been sitting in traffic, or maybe just cleaning your room, when a song from 2010 suddenly starts playing? In a fraction of a second, you are completely transported. You are no longer an adult with bills, responsibilities, and endless to-do lists. You are back in your childhood bedroom. You can almost feel the exact temperature of the air, the smell of the perfume or cologne you used to wear, the intense feeling of having your whole life ahead of you. A profound, almost painful ache hits you right in the center of your chest. You want to go back. You crave that simpler time like a physical addiction. But here is the crazy, mind-bending paradox of this feeling. If you were to somehow open a portal and actually step back into that exact day in 2010, you would probably hate it. If you look at your old journals, or really force yourself to remember the actual daily details of that era, the truth is you were miserable back then too. You were stressed out of your mind about school exams. You were dealing with devastating heartbreak. You felt deeply insecure about your body, your social status, and your future. You had no money, no true independence, and you spent half your time wishing you could just grow up already. So, what is going on here? If your past was filled with just as much anxiety and confusion as your present, why does your brain lie to you? Why do we desperately crave a past that never actually existed? Welcome to the psychology of nostalgia. Today, we are going to explore the fascinating neuroscience of why your brain is actively editing your memories. We are going to break down how nostalgia is currently being used by your mind as a psychological defense mechanism against the overwhelming modern world. And most importantly, we will discuss how you can appreciate your past without using it as a dangerous escapist drug to avoid your present reality. To understand why your brain lies to you, we first have to understand what nostalgia actually is. The word itself comes from the Greek words nostos, which means to return home, and algos, which means pain or suffering. It literally translates to the pain of wanting to return home. But what you might not know is that for centuries, nostalgia was actually considered a deadly neurological disease. In the late 17th century, a Swiss doctor named Johannes Hofer coined the term to describe a mysterious illness affecting Swiss mercenaries fighting in foreign lands. These soldiers were so incredibly homesick that they stopped eating. They developed intense fevers, they hallucinated, and some even died. Dr. Hofer believed that the constant ringing of cowbells in the Swiss Alps had physically damaged the soldiers' eardrums and brain tissue, trapping their minds in a loop of memories. In the American Civil War, military doctors actually banned military bands from playing certain tunes because it would trigger massive waves of nostalgia among the troops, leading to depression and desertion. We might laugh at the idea of cowbells damaging brain tissue today, but those early doctors were actually onto something fundamental. Nostalgia is incredibly powerful. It is not just a fleeting thought, it is a profound physiological and psychological event. Modern psychological studies, like the groundbreaking work done by Dr. Konstantin Sedekides at the University of Southampton, have shown that nostalgia actually acts as an emotional thermostat. In one fascinating experiment, researchers placed participants in a freezing cold room and others in a comfortable room. The people in the cold room spontaneously started experiencing nostalgic memories at a much higher rate. And amazingly, when they indulged in those memories, they reported feeling physically warmer. Nostalgia is your brain pulling a psychological blanket over you when the environment gets harsh. But here is where the deep dive gets really interesting and a little bit unsettling. The blanket your brain is pulling over you, it is woven out of lies. What you are experiencing when you feel nostalgic is not an accurate memory of what actually happened. You are falling victim to a well-documented cognitive bias known as Rosy Retrospection, combined with something called the fading affect bias. Think of your memory not as a video camera that records reality perfectly, but as a heavily biased movie editor whose only goal is to protect your current mental stability. When an event actually happens in real time, you experience the full, raw spectrum of emotions. If you go on a family vacation, you experience the joy of the beach, but you also experience the intense stress of a delayed flight, the agonizing boredom of sitting in traffic, the physical discomfort of a terrible sunburn, and the irritation of arguing with your siblings. However, as time passes, the fading affect bias kicks in. This is a psychological phenomenon where your brain actively ensures that the emotional intensity of negative memories fades significantly faster than the emotional intensity of positive memories. Why? Because from an evolutionary standpoint, holding onto negative emotional intensity forever is paralyzing. If humans remembered the visceral, agonizing pain of childbirth or the sheer terror of hunting dangerous predators as vividly as the day it happened, we would stop reproducing and we would stop hunting. We would go extinct. Your brain deletes the negative emotions from your past because holding on to them is too energetically expensive. So, 5 or 10 years later, your internal movie editor has completely cut out the delayed flights, the sunburns, and the arguments. All that is left on the cutting room floor is the laughing by the pool and the amazing ice cream you had on the final day. The jagged, messy, painful timeline of your actual history is completely smoothed out into a perfect, glowing, flawless path. You are looking at your own life through literal rose-tinted glasses. So why does the brain do this? Why create this fake, perfect past? And why does it seem like our entire generation is more obsessed with nostalgia than any generation before us? The answer is simple. Modern life is incredibly stressful. We are currently living in an age of constant, overwhelming information. We have endless notifications in our pockets, 24/7 news cycles broadcasting doom, intense economic pressure, and a deep, pervasive uncertainty about what the future holds. When the present feels chaotic and totally out of control, and the future feels terrifying and unpredictable, the human brain hits the panic button. And its ultimate, fail-safe defense mechanism is to retreat into a sanitized, predictable, and safe past. The past is safe because you already know how the story ends. There are no surprises in 1999 or 2008. Nostalgia is not just a sweet feeling. It is a psychological shield against modern anxiety. When you feel lonely today, your brain automatically brings up a heavily edited memory of being surrounded by friends at a high school party. When you feel a lack of meaning in your current job, your brain reminds you of a time when everything felt full of magical purpose. It is a brilliant self-soothing mechanism, but there is a dark, dangerous side to this psychological shield. It is called the Escapist Trap. Because if your brain convinces you that the past was utterly perfect, and your reality proves that the present is difficult and stressful, then the present will always, inevitably, feel like a massive disappointment. You start comparing your real, messy, complicated life today with a heavily edited Hollywood highlight reel of yesterday. This is where millions of people get trapped. They start using nostalgia not as a brief comfort, but as an escapist drug. They consume nothing but old media. They replay old video games endlessly. They scroll through old photos and constantly talk about how things used to be so much better. They are trying to live in a house that no longer exists, and as a result, they stop putting bricks into the house they are currently living in. You cannot possibly move forward, build new relationships, or achieve new goals if you are constantly looking backward with a heavy heart. There is even a modern term called anemia, which is experiencing deep nostalgia for a time you never even lived in, like being nostalgic for the 1980s even if you were born in 2005. That is how powerful the desire to escape the present has become. So, what is the resolution? How do we fix this bug in our psychological programming? How do we appreciate the beauty of our past without letting it drown our present? First, you have to acknowledge the editing process. When that massive wave of nostalgia hits you while listening to an old song, stop for a second. Enjoy the warm feeling, let it wash over you, but then consciously, intentionally remind yourself of the full picture. Yes, that summer was incredibly fun, but force yourself to remember how stressed you were about those upcoming exams. Remember the petty drama, remember the insecurity. Ground yourself in the absolute reality of the past, not just the highlights. By seeing the past realistically, you lower the impossible standard you are holding your present life against. Second, recognize nostalgia as a signal, not a destination. When you find yourself desperately craving the past, ask yourself what specific psychological need is missing in your present. If you are nostalgic for a time when you had a close group of friends you saw every day, that is not your brain telling you to invent a time machine. That is your brain telling you that you are currently lonely and you need to put effort into building new connections right now. If you are nostalgic for a time when life felt simple, you might be overworked, overstimulated, and need to drastically simplify your current daily routine. Use nostalgia not as a place to hide under the covers, but as a psychological compass to show you exactly what you need to build in your present life. Finally, practice relentless present focus. The past is a beautiful place to visit on a Sunday afternoon, but it is a terrible, toxic place to live. The only place you can actually affect change, the only place you can actually feel true joy, and the only place you can build a meaningful life is in the present moment. The great, beautiful irony of life is that right now, this very moment that you might be trying to escape will one day become the past. In 10 years, you might look back at today with intense, painful nostalgia. Do not miss the present moment because you were too busy mourning a past that never really existed. We all have to learn to take off the rose-tinted glasses. We must find the courage to see the past for what it actually was, a messy, chaotic mixture of good and bad, just like today. By doing so, we free ourselves to fully experience the present, with all its challenges, its pain, and its incredible beauty. Thank you for exploring the mind with us.